All right. Welcome, everyone. My name is Amber King. I'm here to introduce and welcome you to our Berniecrats, our Revolution Weekend Summit. Normally, we have these in person, and this year we are doing them virtual, of course. And I'm very honored to welcome Cindy Black with Fix Democracy First.
Hi there. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. As Amber mentioned, I'm Cindy Black with Fix Democracy First. I'm the executive director in Fix Democracy First. We are a Washington state-based nonpartisan organization that just works on democracy reform efforts to strengthen our democracy. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and talk a little bit about what's happening in democracy efforts in the state and nationally. And so first thing I want to do is talk about the voting. I'm going to jump right into democracy bills here in the state that are happening right now. And we'll have plenty of time for questions too, but if you do have questions, you can go ahead and put them in the chat or the Q&A field. If you're on Facebook, hopefully someone can monitor that and call out the questions as need be. I don't mind being interrupted if you have questions for me, but we will have time at the end. So first off, I want to get into democracy bills that are in Washington state that's happening right now. And I'm focusing on primarily just a handful of bills that either we're supporting or keeping an eye on to see what happens with them. The first bill I'm very excited to talk about is House Bill 1078. It is, if you see an SB, by the way, if you see an SB for the name, that's a substitute bill. So that means that the original bill had some substitution along the way, and that's why the S is in front of it. But it started out as House Bill 1078. Now it's substitute House Bill 78. And this is for voting rights restoration. So basically this bill restores voting rights to people that have been convicted of a felony upon immediate release from prison. So all formerly incarcerated people will get their voting rights back as soon as they're released. Right now in Washington state, you have to be off of what's called community custody. Some states call it like parole, but this would just enable people to get their voting rights back immediately without having to wait to be off of community custody. Also, too, it doesn't have any effect on whether anybody has any legal fines or obligations. So that is not a part of the picture either. The prime sponsor is Representative Tara Simmons, who herself is a formerly incarcerated person. She's a freshman this year, and so we're very excited to support her. I'm also part of the Washington Voting Rights Restoration Coalition, and have been working with them on this bill, led by a lot of people from the organization Civil Survival and the Washington Voting Justice Coalition and several other groups. Currently, we're very excited. Just this past week, the bill passed the House. We're very excited, and now it's going to be moving on to the Senate. So now we're asking people to contact senators to help move this bill forward, but we're expecting to get a hearing in the Senate, State Government, and Elections Committee very soon. So we're very excited to see this bill move forward, and hopefully it'll pass this year. It has been in the legislature for a couple of years. In the past, Senator Patty Cooter was leading the effort, but now this year, Representative Simmons is doing that. The next bill I want to talk about, another bill I'm very excited about, is the local options bill. We've been working on this bill for, I think it's 4 years now, just started in 2017, 2018, and now it's moving forward. So basically the local options bill, which is House Bill 1156 now, substitute House Bill 1156, called the Local Options Bill. And this bill would allow jurisdictions to adopt ranked choice voting. If you don't know what ranked choice voting is, that's where you get to rank your candidates, your first choice, second choice, third choice, and so on. I won't get into a whole lot of details, but if you have questions about that, I can answer more of that later. But we're very excited about this bill. The prime sponsor this year is Representative Kirsten Harris-Talley. She's also a freshman representative this year, and we're very excited that she's embraced this issue. I used to work with Kirsten when she was working with Progress Alliance. So I'm really happy to see her as a representative now. This bill has passed both the state government and tribal relations committee and the House Appropriations Committee with bipartisan support. This is the first year it's actually had Republicans vote in favor of it as well. And it was just pulled from the Rules Committee to go for a floor vote. And so we haven't heard when it's up for a floor vote, but probably in the next few days, it's going to be on the House floor for a vote. And if it passes that, which we think it will, we think it has enough support, it'll go on to the Senate and then it'll go through the whole thing. For people that aren't aware about how the legislation works in our state as well as on a national level, is that the bill goes through, there's two chambers, the House, the Senate, and then the governor. So basically it has to go through both chambers, whatever the House of origin, this one is in the House, and then it goes through the Senate, and then once it passed there, the governor has to sign it. So we're very excited to see this bill moving forward. The next bill is Senate Bill 5170, close the lobbying revolving door bill. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of groups working on us. Fixed Democracy First and the League of Women Voters are two of the only organizations in the state that work regularly on campaign finance reform and lobbying bills, disclosure, and things like that. So basically, the League and Fixed Democracy First has really been the ones we were two of the only groups that even testified for this bill. But basically, it would enable a cooling off period when an elected official or a head of a state organization like transportation or health and human services or whatever, if you had a high position in one of the state organizations as well as an elected official, you would have 1 year cooling off period before you could go work for, say, Amazon. Or want to mention Guy Palumbo, who left his office and immediately went to go work for Amazon. Like basically he left the office one day and the next day he's working for Amazon. So this would give a 1 year cooling off period. We originally wanted 2 to 3 years cooling off period, and it's been whittled down to 1 year. And this bill has also seen different manifestations over the last few years, but it's really hard to get elected officials to change things that affect them personally. But we are only one of a handful of states that don't have any type of cooling off period. And though we have some good campaign finance laws in the state, we do not have a cooling off period. 37 other states in Washington, D.C., as well as the federal government, all have somewhere between a year to 2 year cooling off period. So we think we should be joining those states and doing that. And Senator Reuben Carlisle is sponsoring this time. Last year it was Representative Mike Pelliciotti, but he was elected to state treasurer, so he's no longer in an elected official in the House of Representatives anymore. The bill did pass out of the Senate State Government and Elections Committee, but it's in the Rules Committee right now. So we're waiting for Rules to pull it, because what happens is Rules is sort of one of the last steps before it goes to a floor vote. Though leadership can pull a bill like they did with the local options, and for a floor vote before it has to be pulled in Rules Committee. So it's got to jump through a few hoops before it gets there. But right now, we're waiting to see if the Senate Rules Committee pulls that bill for a floor vote. So, and I'm going to give you some information and put links and share some links for folks. Hopefully you'll be able to reach out to your representatives and your senators to help pass some of these bills. But that's a priority for us, this bill. Another bill that is moving forward is harassment of elected officials bill. We saw a lot of elected officials around the state. It didn't matter if they were a Democrat or a Republican, didn't like the election results and began to verbally and also threaten violently many of the elected officials in our state. And we're very concerned about this. Because we feel like if you're an elected official, you need to do your job without being harassed. So this elevates the harassment of an elected official to a Class C felony. And it just passed the state Senate this week, and now it's going to go to the House. So we're expecting a hearing in this bill, but this one will be heard in the House Public Safety Committee. So we're keeping an eye on that one, but it did pass the state Senate just this week, a couple days ago. And then another bill, many of you recognize that when you get your ballot, there's all these things called advisory votes on your ballot. And basically this bill would eliminate advisory votes. And the reason why we want to eliminate those, they don't do anything. They got on the ballot because of a Tim Eyman initiative, and it has to do with any type of tax increase. So if there's any type of bill that has any type of fiscal note to it, it's required to be put on the ballot to have folks either what is it? I'm sorry, I'm losing my train of what the two words is, like repeal or maintain. Those are, is it repeal or maintain? The problem with that is it does nothing. It's already a law. So this is more like a push poll. And the problem with this, and my personal issue with this, if you really care about taxpayer dollars, why would you put something on the ballot that costs a whole lot of money for election officials to put it on the ballot as well as in the voters pamphlet? When it doesn't do anything. It's very confusing to voters. Um, Election officials get more questions about these than anything else. And so we think they need to be eliminated. They don't do anything. And in fact, they have to be at the top of the ballot. So sometimes if there's like 10 of these, it takes forever to get to the real ballot. And it's very confusing, as I mentioned. So we would like to get rid of those advisory votes. If you don't like a bill, there's other things you can do, but this doesn't do anything. It's more like a survey or a push poll. And Senator Patty Cooter has been trying to get rid of these for a while now. So we're really trying to support her in that. The bill did pass out of the Senate State Government Committee and has referred to the Rules Committee. And so we're waiting to see what Rules does with this. And then the last bill I want, or it's actually a resolution I want to mention, Fixed Democracy First. We're remaining neutral on this one because we've had a lot of our board members had some concerns about parts of this. But basically, and if you've heard of the group Wolfpack, they're pushing this one in particular. So this is Senate Joint Memorial 8002, and it requests a constitutional amendment on campaign finance reform. So basically, this would ask Congress to pass a constitutional amendment to regulate campaign contributions, distinguish between natural persons and artificial entities, prohibit artificial entities from making any type of campaign contribution, and require disclosure of contributions. But the part that is we have a lot of issues with is that it's requesting a constitutional convention if no amendment is sent by November 5th, 2024. So this memorial did adopt some of the language. Many of you know that back in 2016, I was a campaign director at the time for this initiative, 735, that called for a constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United. So this has some of that language in there, but we were going the traditional route through Congress, but this was saying if Congress doesn't do it by November 5th, 2024, then the states can call a convention, an Article 5 convention, to try to put this through. The reason why people are concerned about the Article 5 convention is we've never passed an amendment to our US Constitution using this, and they are concerned about a runaway convention and conservative folks trying to get a balanced budget in there, repealing marriage equality, and a variety of other things. And so that's some of the concerns. Senator Patty Cooter is sponsoring this one. Last year we had one, SJM 8001, with Senator Hasagawa, but they decided to combine our language with the Wolfpack one and do it this way. Personally, this is just totally a personal, I am in favor of this just because anything to kick maybe Congress in the butt to get moving on this, I'm in favor, but that's not our official position. So that is just, I want to put that out there that though I personally may be behind for this particular one, our organization Fixed Democracy First is remaining neutral. I just want to be clear on that. So the bill did pass out of the Senate State Government Committee. and has been referred to the Senate Rules Committee. We're not sure if it's going to go forward or not, but we'll see about that. Oh, I forgot to mention on the local options bill that I mentioned previously for ranked choice voting, if that bill does not pass this year in the state legislature, there's talk that we're going to have a ballot initiative next year for the 22 election. And we work closely with Fair Vote Washington on this particular one, More Equitable Democracy, and the Washington Community Alliance on that. So we'll see what happens with that. But either way, we're going to be pushing for ranked choice voting. I forgot to mention that one. Now I'm going to shift gears a little bit. Those are all the bills that I wanted to talk about. And there may be a couple other ones, but those are the ones that we're either supporting or following. I want to, and before I forget, there are a couple places if you want to get updates on the bills, track bills, contact your legislators or comment on bills. You can go to leg.wa.gov. We call it ledge.wa.gov. I know it says leg, but we call it ledge, short for legislature. And also fixeddemocracyfirst.org/legislation is our page that has updates on this legislature as well. I do want to mention that I've been so busy this last week because we just finished a Democracy Lobby Week. It hasn't been updated with the newest information that I just shared with you, but that will be updated by tomorrow or Monday the latest. So that'll have up-to-date information on it. And now I want to shift gears to talk about redistricting because this is a redistricting year. We just had a census last year. And so now every state is going to redraw their congressional and legislative districts and even the smaller districts going forward. And so in Washington state, we have what's called the Bipartisan Redistricting Commission, and it's made up of 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans, and a non-voting chair. It will also be adding some staff, an executive director and other staff to help implement it. So this year, this is our 2021 Redistricting Commission. So how it works is that the Senate Democrats pick one person, the Senate Republicans pick one person, the House Democrats pick one person, and the House Republicans pick one person. So these are the people on there. And I'm a part of the Washington Redistricting Coalition, and we really pushed to get more diversity in the commission this year because previous years it's always been white, usually white men that are part of the commission, and we wanted to mix it up and said, no, we need more diversity to represent the state better. So luckily we have, we got our wish. In fact, at least with the Democrats, is that they appointed 2 people of color, and then also the non-voting chair is also a person of color. So we have Brady Pinheiro Walkinshaw and April Sims. Brady is Latino and April is Black, and Sarah Augustine, the non-voting chair, is Native American from the Yakama Nation. And then the Republicans picked 2 white men, Joe Fain and Paul Graves. So I do want to mention there is a lot of talk right now because I don't know if many of you remember, but Joe Fain was accused of rape a couple of years ago and did not get reelected to the Senate. And so there is a push right now to replace him, and the Redistricting Coalition that I'm working with are putting forth a letter to say we want to ensure public and staff safety, and we think the Republicans should pick somebody else. So I do want to mention that. Also, too, when they pick the commission, they can't be an elected official or a party lead prior to 2 years, and no registered lobbyists. So these are all people that maybe have run for office or been elected officials in the past. April Sims actually works for the State Labor Council. And Sarah Augustine, she works with mediation, and I forget the name of her organization out in Tri-Cities area, but that's our commission right now. So the next thing I want to talk a little bit about the redistricting timeline, what's happening. So last year was the census in 2020, and now in 2021, they picked the commission. And they're going to be hiring staff. They're looking for an executive director to help run the program and the commission, and also to open up for public hearings and things like that. We are working with the League of Women Voters on what's called Speak Up Schools. And the Speak Up Schools, what they're going to do is train people how to testify before the commission. In previous years, in the last, because it only happens every 10 years. 10 years ago, there was only 600 people total that testified before the commission throughout the state 10 years ago. This year, our goal is to try to get over 2,000 people to testify before the commission. So we're doing coaching and training, and I'm going to put, I have a bunch of links that I want to share that will definitely help with different, and let me go ahead and put some of these links in there now before I forget, because I got a lot of links to share. First, I'm going to do some of the legislation stuff. Let me just take a minute to do some of that. I just want to do that one. That's some of the legislation. And basically, the links that I'm putting in there, all of these have to do with the link to the bill page, but all the bill pages, what's good about that, there's a comment page. And so I do want to encourage people to go to the comment page, and whether you support the bill or not, I'm not going to tell you to support it or not, but if you do or not, we encourage you to use the comment button, because that comment will go to your representatives and senators based on your where you live. I also wanted to mention, I forgot earlier, is that March 9th is the cutoff date where the bill has to pass the House of Origin. So if it's a House bill, it has to pass the House. If it's a Senate bill, it has to pass the Senate. And then April 9th is the cutout for the bill to pass in the opposite House. So I wanted to mention that as well. And then for redistricting, I do want to share a couple of links here on. There's a website for the Redistricting Commission, and then also the Speak Up Schools. And then also too, we are hosting Fixed Democracy First with the League of Women Voters and an organization called Delta Kappa Gamma, which is women educators, are hosting a series of redistricting workshops. If you want to get interested in redistricting, you can go to the Redistricting 101. We also have an orientation and testifying training that's a little bit longer. It's like 3.5-hour training, but we have April Sims, who's going to be our guest speaker at that one, and that's next Saturday, a week from today. So our redistricting one is on Tuesday. Our redistricting orientation and training is on the 6th. Then we're doing a data lenses that actually looks at demographics and shows you, where everybody's located based on preliminary data. And so if you're interested in getting nerdy on this and knowing more about how they draw the maps, we encourage you to go to some of those. And then we're working with Dave Bradley, who created the Dave's Redistricting app, which makes it really great for anybody can get involved in submitting their own maps and drawing their own maps. And we're going to have a workshop with him on March 25th. So I did put that all in the link. So basically what's going to happen now, and unfortunately, I don't know if any of you heard, but the data for the census has been pushed back now to the end of September, which makes it really difficult because the final maps are due the middle of November. So it gives a very short window to be able to get those maps drawn. And we think a lot of it had to do with the Trump administration in trying to get immigrants not counted in the census, but that got overruled luckily. And so they're trying to make sure all that data gets added. So that is postponing when the data for the census will be released. So it's going to be a really tight schedule to get those maps done. But there are going to be public hearings that's going to happen starting in May or June and going through September, October. The final maps are due on the 15th of November. And then there's any amendments they got to do, they have until early February of next year. And then they have to be all ready before the primaries, the 22 primaries. So that gives you an idea. But testifying is going to be happening somewhere starting in May through June. May starts May and June and goes through September, October. We don't have the exact dates yet because the commission hasn't lined those out yet. But if you go to the commission page, you can sign up for notifications, and which is really helpful. So let me move right along here. I am going to now get into, oops, I jumped ahead, get into some national legislation, because this is also an area that we work in. Fixed democracy first, though we focus on state reforms, we also really support a lot of national efforts too for democracy reform. And I'm a part of a coalition called the Declaration for American Democracy, which is made up of 190 organizations that are focused on democracy efforts. In particular, the one I want to talk about is the For the People Act. And the For the People Act is HR 1 in the House and S1 in the Senate. It's up for a vote in the House next week. All the Democrats have already signed on to this, including Bernie. Has signed on to sponsor this legislation. It is I can't even get into everything that's in the bill because it would take me all day to do it. But basically, this is comprehensive democracy reform legislation that includes everything from modernizing our voter registration, like we have some of these laws that have already passed in Washington, like automatic voter registration, same day, pre-registration for 16 and 17-year-olds. This bill would require every state to adopt a lot of those things. It restores a lot of voting rights and protecting voters, all, things like early voting, voting by mail, making it easier for people to access absentee voting, all of those things, restoring the Voting Rights Act, DC and territorial voting rights, and ending gerrymandering. Unfortunately, some of the gerrymandering stuff in redistricting reform may not happen until 2030. Though we are, hopefully some of us are trying to push forward, and hopefully some of that will um, um, get amended so it can affect this year. But a lot of that, unfortunately, if it passed earlier last year, we could have affected this year's redistricting process, but we may not know. It also has things in there on election security, countering foreign interference, campaign transparency, small donor financing, other related reforms, enforcing our existing campaign finance laws, and strengthening campaign limits, expanding disclosure, including lobbyist disclosure, dealing with foreign agent registration, recusal of presidential appointees. It also has a lot of ethics and accountability reforms in there that involve the Supreme Court, the executive branch, and the congressional branches of government. So all three branches will have more ethics reform and disclosure of presidential tax returns. That is just a short little summary, but I'm going to put in a link in the chat on the bill, and also a annotated guide that the Brennan Center of Justice put together, so you can read details about that. Is it, again, a perfect bill? Does it have everything that we want in there exactly the way we're written? Maybe not, but it is really good. There's a lot of great stuff in there. So even though there might be a couple of things we could be stronger about and do a little bit better, if we get this bill passed, it's huge. And I do want to mention that I wanted to say that I'm going to put in a couple other links about that bill. I mentioned the Declaration for American Democracy Coalition you can look at. There's also a Take Action page where you can call your legislators about it. And then it's up for a vote next Wednesday, the 3rd. I put 12 p.m. Pacific time, but we're not sure exactly when they're going to be doing it. But there is a watch party on that. And Sharon asked a good question. Do we think it'll pass both houses? We know for sure it's going to pass the House. The Senate is a whole other story because of the filibuster, and then there's a couple of moderates in there. We're afraid that the Senate might pick it apart or just maybe pass pieces of it, but that's going to be a bigger fight ahead. So we're going to have to keep an eye on that. So we'll talk more about that if people have questions. I have a couple other bills I want to mention for national bill. One is also the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. Many of you might have heard of the Shelby County versus Holder Supreme Court case of 2013 that basically gutted the Voting Rights Act and said, oh yeah, it's not needed anymore. Well, wrong, right? We saw so much voter suppression happening in the last presidential election. And we're seeing a lot of state legislatures put in lots of different type of voter suppression bills, making, um, more identification requirements, closing early voting, making it harder to vote in many ways. And I can say that to this crowd because you're a very progressive crowd. And normally I wouldn't say that because I'm supposed to be nonpartisan, but the reality is the Republicans just don't have the votes to win like they used to. And one of the only ways they can win and keep seats, especially in state legislatures, is to suppress the vote in one way or the other and make it hard and put a lot of barriers to voting. And that's just the reality right now. So the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, which is HR 4 rather, is basically would restore and strengthen a lot of the original Voting Rights Act and address a lot of things in a way that it really needs to be addressed. Let's just face it. And so it would modernize the VRA's formula for determining which states and localities have a pattern of discrimination, ensuring that you can't do last minute voting changes that adversely affect voters. And you have to publicly announce all the voting changes at least 180 days in advance, which is about 6 months. And it expands the government's authority to send federal observers into a jurisdiction to observe if there's racial discrimination going on. Because the reality is a lot of these voting suppression laws affect communities of color, Black, Indigenous, and other communities of color. So it's really important that we pass this particular bill. So this is another one. It has not been, the link I put in there was from the 2019 Congress, the 116th version. We are in the 117th Congress now, and they have not released the new bill yet. So that's from the previous one, but because right now it's going through a lot of committees and things like that. So we'll be seeing that bill introduced in the spring sometime. I'm not sure exactly when. And then the last bill I want to mention, even though we're Washington State, we also support the other Washington for DC statehood. So the fact is that Washington, DC would become the 51st state with HR 51. And we see statehood as a matter of racial justice. It's basically a majority minority jurisdiction, and it's been denied full voting rights to residents, and it really dilutes especially communities of color. And also Congress maintains the power to overturn the local population's elected leadership and laws. So if they don't like something, Congress can overturn that. So they don't have the same state privileges as every other state. And again, every time I talk about this, taxation without representation. This state has not had representation, and it continues to pay taxes. They have veterans that live there that aren't getting represented. More than 700,000 people live in DC, and that's more than the state of Wyoming and Vermont, and almost as many as Alaska and North and South Dakota. So we really want to push for DC statehood. I'll put links in the chat for that as well. And there's a DC vote action page if you're interested in learning more about that. And then finally, I do want to put this up. This is just the local offices for your congressional delegation representatives. And so if you're interested in contacting your local representatives, we advise you actually, they do have their DC phone numbers, but we think it could have some more impact by calling their local offices. So, and it doesn't hurt to call all the numbers, right? Call their DC office and their local offices. But here's all the different congressional representatives in our state. We have 10. We have 10 congressional districts, and that will stay, by the way, with redistricting. Even though we got a million more people in the state proportionally, we'll still have just 10 districts. And so the last thing I just want to mention is if you want to contact me, I'm Cindy. Oh, and I thought I put that wrong, but that's right. Cindy at fixeddemocracyfirst.org, or you can email info@fixeddemocracyfirst.org, and there's our website. And I will also put some links for our website in the chat. if you're interested in signing up for our email, we have an email sign up if you want to donate. We are a nonprofit. I am the only staff. We do have an intern and a webmaster, but it would really nice to get some more staff, because I got to tell you, working on democracy is hard. So check those things out. And I am going to stop sharing now. And I did that fast because that was a lot of info. So I'm happy to take questions, but I wanted to make sure we covered at least the highlights.
Rockstar as ever, and I know that there's a couple questions for you. I saw some Q&A. So John asks, will HR 1 and S1 reverse the awful Citizens United decision?
The reality about Citizens United is we're not going to be able to really overturn Citizens United without a US constitutional amendment. It will increase disclosure and encourage, the things that we can already do around some campaign limits and disclosure we can do. But I do want to mention that the Koch network is putting through, in fact, we'll be hearing about that this year, is putting through a case that would challenge disclosure laws that California has, which is similar to what we have. We have some of the best disclosure laws in the country, but there's just going to be a Supreme Court case that will even challenge disclosure coming up. So we're really concerned about that. But unfortunately, this bill cannot overturn Citizens United because we can't do that because it's a Supreme Court decision. And we can't do that until we get a constitutional amendment. And that's one reason why we also support HJR 48, which is also moved to amend. There's also HJR 1 that would call for an amendment, but we don't think the language is strong enough for that one. So we've been supporting the one with the stronger language. Though, to be honest with you, anything moving forward would be good on this, because Citizens United is probably one of the worst things that happened, along with Buckley versus Vallejo, McCutcheon decision. And I do want to mention super PACs came out of a lower court decision called speechnow.org versus the FEC that came out in a lower DC 9th court, district court right after Citizens United that basically sanctioned super PACs. So super PACs came out of that afterwards, but we're going to need a constitutional amendment, unfortunately, which is a bigger leap.
Jason kind of is expanding on some of that and is asking kind of what are the odds of it passing realistically. It's got all the votes of Dems in the Senate.
Well, we think there might be a couple of senators that may not be as friendly to this as we'd hoped, unfortunately. And that's a big issue, because you got a couple of more, moderate Democrats that basically they're almost Republicans that have some issues with the bill. And because the bill is so comprehensive and has so many things, the Senate is more nitpicky, but we think the filibuster is the biggest hurdle. So the Dems can negotiate and get around that. Will they? I don't know. So that's the biggest hurdle. At least it'll get some hearings this time. It's never gotten any hearings in the Senate before because Mitch McConnell leading the Senate would not allow it. So it will at least get hearings and move forward on that way. But we're all waiting to see. In fact, our next big hurdle is the Senate. We're going to be doing a lot of work around that.
Beautiful.
Yeah, Jason also mentioned if Biden expands the Supreme Court. There is some talk about trying to do some things with the Supreme Court. One is term limits. The other is expanding the Supreme Court. So we're waiting to see what might happen with that. I don't know if that is realistically going to happen, but something needs to happen with the courts, because, the reality is that the way the Supreme Court is right now, we're really worried about making campaign finance worse, even it is, and undermining some of the other things that have already happened. We're waiting to see what they're going to do around the disclosure case out of California that's going forward. But again, it's the Koch network, like Americans for Prosperity, if you know them.
Excellent. Leo has a question. And this I know is going to get answered, I think, in our next section, because it's part of what they're going to be talking about. But would passing 5008 have Washington added to the list of states that have agreed to convene a convention?
What is 5008? I'm sorry. I don't know
I
what,
don't know which one that is off the top of my head. I
it
don't know what
wasn't one that
number.
I covered, so I'm not sure what 5008 is. I don't know what 5008 is.
Yeah, Lael, if we can hold this for our next section, we have, yeah, we have people that are going to be talking about that particular and would know about 5008, I believe. So
Is that a House bill? Is that a House bill? I mean, a Washington state bill, or is that a national bill? I'm just curious.
oh, there's one in Washington, yes. To
And what would the bill do? Is that on health?
add
Oh, it would, oh, you're talking about the one that, for the,
Wolfpack.
no, Wolfpack's is 8,002.
8,002. Sorry, I knew there was an 8 in there. I got confused.
Yeah, 5008, I don't know what that one is. 8002 is the Senate Joint Memorial that Wolfpack has been supporting, and it does combine some of the language from our initiative 735 from 2016, which I said I personally support, but our organization is remaining neutral on it.
Right. Hopefully that answered your question, Lael.
And it's easy to get the bills confused, trust me. Very easy to do that.
Excellent. Does anybody else have any? Oh, looks like Stephen.
Oh, Americans for Prosperity. Well, yeah. Yeah, they're an interesting group. You know, the reality with the Republican Party is they have leaned more libertarian, but they've, you know, that's really the Koch network has done, is really moved the Republicans into a libertarian stance that everything should be privatized, like literally everything, you know, from our schools to our healthcare system, which already is, but everything else too, water. I mean, I'm sure they charge it for the air that we breathe if they could. But you know, everything should be privatized. The issue with that is that it doesn't have a lot of popular support, that type of thing. So what they've done is they've embraced these other fringe issues and fringe groups. And that's why the Republican Party has turned into what it was. It used to be way more moderate. In fact, if you look in the 1950s, the Republican platform, it would look like the Democrat platform today.
Yeah, it's a little bit crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, and Amber put another link to that bill in the chat. Thank you, Amber. I shared that earlier as well. Yeah.
Excellent. Anybody else have any questions? We've got Cindy Black here for a few more moments with so much knowledge up in there. Really anything kind of democracy related?
Yeah, Sharon has her hand up.
Woo,
Yeah.
let me give Sharon.
I really don't know if this is an answerable question or not, but being that there are these really important films and they are getting exposure across the country, whether it's about gerrymandering or dark money or whatever, you know, I've been feeling for a long, long time like we need to have a national conversation about our inability to actually either vote or have our vote counted. Do you think is there any way to measure how much of an impact it might be having at this point? Then is there any way to have more of a national discussion about it?
Well, there is actually a lot of national discussion going on. As I mentioned, I'm part of a couple of different national coalitions, including the Declaration for American Democracy, that's mostly focused on the 3 bills that I mentioned. But there are a lot of groups. One thing that has come out of what's happened over the last few years is there's a lot more groups and a lot more activism going on than I've seen ever. If you look at Stacey Abrams' group, Fair Fight, down in Georgia, and many other groups that have begun to form to talk about these type of things. I mean, there's going to be some pushback, but the reality is, especially as young people come into power, we're going to see some real shifts happening in our democracy in a good way, I think. You know, I'm hoping it happens in my lifetime. Let's just say that. But I do think that there is hope, though we're going to have a lot of hurdles ahead, a lot of fights ahead. But if you looked at what happened with the last election, 2020, it could have gone a lot of different ways. And there was an attempted coup on January 6th, but they were very unsuccessful. And so, but I think that had a lot to do with groups that were prepared for that too and ready to fight for those type of things. So I think there's the majority of people in this country are willing to protect what we have and improve it. And the more people we bring in, the more young people we bring into the conversation, make it definitely diversity, equity, and inclusion always a part of the conversation, the better off we'll be in the long run. So I am hopeful for democracy, though we got a lot of hurdles ahead. My personal passion, I got involved with this dealing with Citizens United and trying to get a constitutional amendment, though I've kind of been working on everything else since then. Hopefully we'll eventually get there, but I think eventually we'll get there. It's just going to take a while. And I know you're going to be talking about ending Citizens United in the next session, so I don't want to take away Marty and Jeff's steam on that one. So
Excellent. Anybody else for Cindy? I don't have anything on Facebook asking questions.
and I think we did
Amber?
that in just under 50 minutes, so that worked out pretty good. All right.
So we're gonna ask Sharon and Michael to get ready. We're gonna have some music around corruption happening here in a moment. I want to thank you, Cindy, for taking the time out this week. And I know you guys you've been just extremely busy. I was part of the Democracy Week that you were doing. Thank you for all your work here, for heading this up and never letting go. We really appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. And feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye. All right, let's go ahead and give the reins over to Sharon and Michael.
Hang on one second. I'm turning my original sound on.
Oh, good.
One more time. End the corruption and the temptation. It's up to us to save the nation. End the corruption and the temptation. It's up to us to save the nation. Get the big money out. Put integrity in. Secure the elections. Then let the voting begin. And the corruption and the temptation. It's up to us to save the nation. And the corruption and the temptation. It's up to us to save the nation. Feel good myths, they cloud our eyes. The truth hurts, but we die with lies. Do we ignore our people's cries? Or do we, all the people, rise? And the corruption and the temptation, it's up to us to save the nation. And the corruption and the temptation, it's up to us to save the nation. Here is what we want to see. Democracy for you and me. Ranked choice voting, a paper trail. And those who cheat, put them in jail. Oh, and the corruption and the temptation, it's up to us to save the nation. And the corruption and the temptation, it's up to us to save the nation. If we can't vote, what have we got? If our votes don't count, our country is shot. Feels so hopeless, but it's not. But we gotta go deep to cure the rot in the system and the
the temptation. It's up to us to save the nation.
Oh, who is writing that legislation? Sounds like goons from a big corporation. How'd that public servant turn a millionaire? It's time for us to get our share. Hey, it's only fair.
And the corruption and the temptation, it's up to us to save the nation. And the corruption and the temptation, it's up to us to save the nation.
Woo! Thank you, thank you, thank you. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to end this live stream. We're going to come back on live with Wolfpack. Just because there's a little bit of lag here, we'll just refresh it. Thank you, Sharon and Michael, and we'll see the rest of you here shortly.